Can I ask you please to stand for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Alderman Doug Chipman.
Good evening everyone, and thank you. Particularly given that we're so many in the public gallery there tonight, I thank you for your perseverance while it's so crowded. Tonight I'd like to invite Father Peter from the Catholic Parish Authority of Lindsfarne to open our proceedings with a prayer.
This last month has been a time for remembering the Christian community, remembering Easter, the Passion, Death and Resurrection of Christ. The whole community remembering, of course, on Anzac Day, the sacrifices that were made, the many ways in which we cast our minds back to Gallipoli and through the skirmishes down through the many generations. It's also time for each one of us to remember with gratitude all the things that have been a part of our lives, our freedom, the sense of justice and understanding of people. When we think of other countries, the poverty and the way in which many people live, we have a lot to remember, a lot to be thankful for. So we pray that our God would give us peace and harmony, that he would be with us on our journey and help us to always remember those who have journeyed with us and those who have gone before and made us and our country who and what we are. Amen.
Amen. Before proceeding, I'd like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community, the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on tonight, and pay respects to elders past and present. And also advise everyone that the meeting is being recorded audio-visually and will be available on the Clarence City Council website later this week. Thank you. Declare the meeting open and note an apology from Alderman McFarlane. Item 2, confirmation of minutes for 10th of April. Alderman Pearce, seconded by Alderman Chong. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 3, there's nothing to report. Item 4, Council notes the workshops conducted on the 19th of April and 26th of April and the agenda briefs on the 28th of April. Thank you, Alderman Pearce. Thank you, Alderman von Bertha. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 5, declarations of interest of Alderman or close associate. There being none. Item 6, tabling of petitions. General Manager.
Mr Mayor, I do have one here somewhere. Mr Mayor, I have a petition received from 63 signatories objecting to the planning application to develop a 3-storey high residential units at 4 to 6 Chatsworth Street in Roseburn.
Thank you. Are there any other petitions from the floor? Item 7, public question time. There are no matters on notice. Are there any questions from members of the public without notice? Thank you. Item 8, we have deputations. Alderman Chong.
Before we move to item 8, can I move a procedural motion, please?
Certainly.
The motion is that the hearing of the deputations on the Lauderdale Urban Expansion Feasibility Study listed on the agenda be deferred until later in the evening in the meeting and be heard at the commencement of item 11.7.4, and that item 11.7.4 be considered as the first item on the governance section of the agenda. And section B, that sufficient of the Council's standing orders under Council's meeting procedures policy be suspended to provide for a question time of maximum 15 minutes at the conclusion of each deputation presentation on the Lauderdale Urban Expansion Feasibility Study, on the understanding that questions presented by Aldermen are directed to the deputation as a whole.
It being a procedural, there's no debate. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8, Part A, deputations by members of the public. General Manager.
Mr Mayor, we have one deputation speaker at this stage, and that's Mr Rodney Dewhurst of Lauderdale, who wishes to address Council in relation to the rezoning in Lauderdale. It says Dewhurst. Rodney Dewhurst?
I'm Rodney Dewhurst.
Okay, if you can come forward, please.
We can't hear you up here. Send the speakers up. We'd appreciate it. Right, thank you.
My name is Rodney Dewhurst. I live in Lauderdale on acreage, and I have lived there for 47 years. I am fully aware and conversant with the land involved. Through the years, when land has become available there, people have bought blocks, built houses and raised their families there. In recent times, some of the block or houses have been purchased by absentee landlords. Their only interest in what's going on tonight is to subdivide and make a lot of money with no consequential interest in the people that live there, such as myself and so many others. What concerns me is what we can expect. We're going to have thousands of litres of hardcore brought in to the properties where those who decide to go ahead. We'll have a procession of lorries going in and out of Lauderdale for I don't know how many years to come. Those people who do not subdivide their blocks will be living in holes. The other thing that concerns me is that when we get re-rated, I can expect to have a very, very severe increase in rates. I'm a pensioner. Result being, I do not know how I can make ends meet. I will be forced to sell my house. And the widow next door is very much in the same position as myself. And considering, with all due respect, that we are looking at $11 million and it'll be plus to be spent on such a project like this, beggars belief. When you consider the consultants which the council employed to look at this situation, they recommended no. Your own people next door here said no. And I hate to think, with all due respect, what our ratepayers in Clarence will think when they look at this small project that's going to go ahead for $11 million and disrupt and ruin lifestyles and a way of living, which I'm one of them. Yeah, it's frightening, but what concerns me is the possibility of me having to sell my house, which I raised my family in, because of absentee landlords who want to make money. They have no interest in the people who live there. And I do find it, well, what can I say? You know, when you're going to possibly lose your house through a stranger who lives on the other side of town. And the misinformation that's been going around since day one, when they came knocking on my door asking me to sign the petition for what's happening. And thank you very much, and please, 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 just think of us poor devils who get lumbered with this situation and lose our houses. Thank you.
And no further speakers at this stage, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, General Manager. There's no matters on notice. Reports from outside bodies. Item 10.1 from single and joint authorities. The March quarterly report still pending with the Southern Tasmanian Council's authority. Copying refuse disposal site to an authority. Yeah.
Very quickly, they're just commencing the liners in the sea cell now.
Thank you. Southern Waste Strategy Authority, Alderman James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Still waiting on the distribution of the surplus funds from the winding up of Southern Waste Strategy Authority. Yep.
Tasmanian Water Corporation has been very publicly revealed. There's a meeting on the 11th of this month in Launceston to consider the government's proposal for the takeover of Taswater, and that'll be there's a briefing by the chairman, Mr Hampton, to this council on next Monday, I believe. Next Thursday.
No, Mr Mayor, Chairman of Taswater, we're coming to brief council next Monday night.
Thank you. And there'll be a special council meeting to consider this council's position in regard to that meeting. Item 10.2, reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies. First of all, the Bicycle Steering Committee.
I wish to put the report
Thank you. Seconded Alderman Chong. Any questions on the Bicycle Steering Committee? Put the motion then. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. The second item is Tracks and Trails Advisory Committee Quarterly Report. Alderman James.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I also seek Council's support for recommendation of the quarterly report.
Second up. Alderman Pearce. Thank you. Any questions? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Are there any other reports to Council? Alderman Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to table the minutes of the House Community Centre on the 16th of March, the minutes of the Richmond Advisory Committee on the 21st of March, and the final evaluation report for the Christmas brunch. I have the Belrose Community Arts minutes, monthly meeting.
Thank you, Alderman Turley. Other reports? Alderman James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Tracks and Trails Advisory Committee minutes of the 20th of April 2017.
Being no other reports, item 11, reports of officers. 11.1, that the information in briefing reports for the 10th and 24th of April be noted. Thank you, Alderman Bomberto. Second, Alderman Cusick. Any discussion on the weekly briefing reports? Okay, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.2, there's no items there, so now I advise that Council intends to sit as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. And the first item is 11.3.1, which is a development application at 31 Beach Street and 57 and 61 Clarence Street for a boundary adjustment. Alderman Cusick, thank you. Thank you, Alderman Thurley. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I need to say, Mr Mayor, I think it's very appropriate infill housing development, although there were two representations, issue raised have been adequately addressed.
I just note that there's no creation of extra lots, so the matter seems quite fine.
Absence of other speakers, I guess there's no need for a right of reply. The motion is for approval, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 11.3.2 is a subdivision application at 63 Cornwall Street, Rose Bay. Alderman Campbell, thank you. Alderman Chong. Speakers? Would you like to speak? The other speakers? The motion then for approval subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 11.3.3 is a development application at 46 Lewis Avenue, 7 Mile Beach. Moved Alderman Campbell. I take Alderman Pearce. Speakers? I'll put the motion, which is also for approval, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously, and that concludes our business as a planning authority. Next item on the agenda is under asset management, 11.5.1. which is Council's response to the National Climate Change Objectives.
I'll move that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please? Alderman Hume. Alderman Bomberto.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm actually moving this on behalf of Alderman Farland, who's not here tonight, not able to be with us. She actually earlier in the year requested that Council look at this issue. I believe that the recommendation is very clear and the officers have done a very thorough report. So I'm not going to go into those details. I think there's two important things to keep in mind here. That Clarence City Council, certainly in the time that I've been on council, which is 9.5 years, has actually been a leader in climate change adaptation. This is actually looking at a different aspect. It's actually looking at climate change mitigation. And so I think this is a very good opportunity for us to actually take leadership in relation to mitigation, because certainly at a state government level there is a lack of initiative in relation to this area. So I think it is really timely that we are actually looking at putting some funds towards mitigation. We need to start somewhere, and that is why we actually need to have that baseline data. I think the other important aspect that we need to actually keep in mind is that council is akin to a corporation. We're actually not managed under the Corporations Act. We have our own act, but we are directed. And recently, earlier in this year, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority actually made some pretty interesting statements in relation to directors' liability as far as climate change risk is concerned. So I think it is very opportune that we actually support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is fairly straightforward, and the amount of money that we're talking about from the budget works out to less than $1 per ratepayer, which, you know, we all need to do our bit, councils, governments across the world, for climate change mitigation, because the more we do for mitigation, the less the costs of adaptation, as Alderman Bomberto referred to. I'd like to see Clarence City Council remain a leader in both mitigation and adaptation. And, you know, as one small council in an entire globe, maybe our impact when it comes to mitigation won't be, you know, that big in overall terms, but the thing is everyone needs to do their bit, just like one taxpayer doesn't, you know, provide a significant amount to the federal budget, but you need, you know, all of those acting together to be able to achieve the whole. So I think it's a very good initiative that we're looking at our commitments, our responsibilities under the Council of Parties or COP21 Paris Agreement.
Other speakers? Alderman Chong.
Thank you, Minister. I actually support this, but I guess I just wanted a bit of comfort with the resources that are being taken up with the ICT project, that we actually have the capacity in-house to do this, put this plan together.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, the resources in-house that would be dealing with this aren't in any way engaged in the ICT project at the moment.
Mr Mayor, I would just like to say at the recent National Australian Local Government Women's Association Conference, there was a wonderful presentation given by Kingborough Council, and it made most of our participants there realise the important work that they were leading on, and they're being recognised for that. And I think local government will take the initiative and proceed forward with this issue, and it will perhaps give a sign to the state government that it needs to pick up its ball a little bit in this area.
Speakers. I reply, Alderman Bomberto. I'll put the motion, which is the recommendation that we consider allocating $19,000 within the context of the budget. All those in favour? Carried unanimously again. Now moving forward, we're up to governance, and given the procedural motion, we will bring forward the Lauderdale Urban Expansion Feasibility Study and initiate that with two group deputations. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, there are two deputations this evening. Each have been allocated 15 minutes. How the two delegations, the members comprise, that they're not limited to 5 minutes each, but each delegation is limited to 15 minutes. At the conclusion of that, each delegation's presentation, Mr Mayor, there is, subject to your agreement, the opportunity for Aldermen to ask questions to the delegation as a whole. If I could ask for the first delegation to come forward, please, and that's comprising Mr Figg, Mr Zurius and Mr Durius. Your call, Mr Mayor.
Well, I need to take leave of the meeting on that. Willing to take, given that the agenda has been listed, if someone's willing to move the procedural motion that the second deputation be considered first.
Spirit of good working relationships, I'll move the motion that that the other delegation group come forward and present to the council.
I have a seconder. Seconded. So being procedural, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Against? 1, 2, 3. The motion is lost. Mr Figg, your opportunity is now. Look, I do ask that this process be done with respectful decorum. There are, of course, different views being presented tonight, and it's very important that each side be given a fair opportunity to present it without intimidation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, we talked about intimidation. I find it quite offensive that you've hired a security guard for tonight and also 2 police officers coming in. Last night I was assaulted by a member associated to one of the aldermen, and I've taken legal action to remedy that situation. So intimidation has already started before this meeting. I now draw your attention to what tonight is actually about. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is not about voting, as we've heard from a previous speaker, for any development. Tonight is about your promise to the members of Lauderdale. Over 2,000 people have petitioned since 2010 for you to rezone Central Lauderdale. Twice you said yes. The Minister has directed you, and I say again, directed you, and I have the evidence here, and if you don't have the evidence, it can be furnished as it has been before, to redo the Lauderdale structure plan. From there, 2 other stages, which the General Manager has told us and some of the other officers, would take approximately a month to continue on after the Lauderdale structure plan has been approved by you tonight. That should take, from what we've been told from your officers, 1 month. That includes the amendment to the STIRLs, which the Minister has asked you to do, and the moving of the urban growth boundary, which the Minister has asked you to do. I bring you back to the role of your aldermen here. You are elected. You are not directors. You are elected to represent me and every single person there and everyone that pays your rates. They pay your pay, and you are responsible to us, not to anyone up here, to us. You are public servants, servants of the public. We have asked for Central Lauderdale to be rezoned. It is miszoned at the moment. If you look at the definition for the rural living, or rural residential as it was before, it says that there is no infrastructure there. That's why it has to be rezoned to rural res. Instead of, until 2007, it was zoned future urban. That means residential. We have now sewerage, water, taxis, for some of you, buses, schools, doctors, shops, Woolworths. You approved $10 million development and you said it'd be delivered in 2014. Do you know why it's not built? Because you're stalling development in Lauderdale. The planning scheme has changed. I could put a retirement village on my property. What can I do now? One house. One house. That's your planning scheme. We've had a gentleman talk about his loss of natural justice. What about my loss of natural justice? I bought my 5 acres for my family and my retirement. I may decide to live there. I may decide to sell it. I should be allowed to do what I want with my land. You are stopping that. The Minister, in his notice, stated that the declaration of the interim scheme clears the way to update the Lauderdale Structure Plan. As you know, the interim scheme has been approved. The Minister states that it's important to fully and fairly consult the property owners and the community in the Lauderdale Structure Plan. Who of you here, including the Alderman, have been spoken to by Council in any meeting since 2010? Can I have a show of hands?
Look, this is not public engagement opportunity, Mr. Peake. It's an opportunity to present your side of the story.
I'm doing that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. No hands were raised. That's because there hasn't been public consultation. And I'll also state that the person who called the tender has told that tenderer, successful tenderer for the Lauderdale Structure Plan, that they were not to talk to the people in Lauderdale, the key stakeholders in this argument. The Minister stated that we must be fully and fairly consulted. We haven't been, whether you're for it or against it. The benefits that are there are many. We will get Woolworths there for a start. It's $100,000 worth of income that you've missed in the last 4 years because you've procrastinated and allowed this to drag on. The income, is this a funny matter, sir?
Mr. Peake, keep on with your presentation, please.
I don't appreciate smokes behind my back. Thank you. The reason that we are here today is through frustration. We have been frustrated, we have been bullied, we have been tormented and told to shut up and not stand here tonight. Well, I'm afraid that the intimidation, the bullying and the assaults will not stop me standing here tonight, or the attitude of this council. You are here to serve us. 35 people have said they don't want it. 2,000 have said they do. 25 of the 29 landowners said they wanted it. I agree that those people that don't should have their say, and they're justified in what they say. But they can't afford a decision unless they know the facts, and neither can I. And you're not being given them. You haven't been asked, as key stakeholders in this argument, whether you want it or you don't. This is a travesty of justice. We have Kangaroo Bay, a project of this council where $5 million was put forward by federal government. And yet, that is a lower lying area in Lauderdale. No problems with Kangaroo Bay. In fact, quite a few of you here are going to China to see if you can get someone to build there. We are there now, and we will save the ratepayers if we decide to build, which is not the argument tonight. If we decide to build, we will do the stormwater. We will do the roads. If we don't, and you don't allow us the rezoning every single ratepayer will pay for that stormwater, will pay for that road. So the argument is false. There is not an added cost. There is actually a cost if you don't do it. And why should I, because I'm on 5 acres, be penalised because 35 people don't want it? Why should that person be penalised because he wants to stay there? That's why you are elected to represent us, to make the decisions. You are paid by us, you represent us. You are part of a corporation there, but you are elected members. You have got nothing to do with the corporation. You represent us. How many of you aldermen have come to talk to either side of the argument? We've asked for meetings to see you and we've been refused. You know that? Since 2010? Refused. Why is that so? You should be ashamed of yourselves to sit there and think that you can get away with this. Your members, 2,000 people out there, have asked for this to go through. The landowners that own the land have asked to talk to you and it's been refused. And we've asked more than once. You should be ashamed. And I don't care whether you vote for me or vote for the gentleman up there or take a bias one way or another or smile behind my back. At the end of the day, you represent every single ratepayer. And if you want to be here in the future, you better stand up and start doing it. Because if you can't, someone else will. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Figg.
There is still 4.5 minutes on the deputation if anyone else wants to speak. There's opportunity for questions.
Okay, Mr. Figg, are you willing to entertain questions? Mr. Figg, are you willing to be questioned?
I certainly am.
Would you like to come forward then and take questions? We have option 15 minutes for further questioning if Aldermen want further clarification. And open the floor. Alderman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Figg, you have read the Council's item that's listed on the agenda this evening in relation to the Lauderdale feasibility.
I have.
On page 176 it says that Council proposed to zone the subject land general residential under the draft interim Council Clarence planning scheme. While this was rejected, the Minister advised in the letter that he was sympathetic to Council's desire. The letter outlines the work that would need to be done for amendment to be considered.
That's correct.
Could you just elaborate on that, please, and just explain to me as to whether the Minister wanted to see it to its full conclusion, or was it just to get the feasibility study up and running, please?
All right. The easiest way to answer that is that the Minister directed that the Council, he was in favour of the rezoning of Central Lauderdale, which is what we've been talking about here. But unfortunately, the paperwork wasn't produced by the Council. The Lauderdale structure plan had to be revisited and redone. The Stirless had to be modified and the urban growth boundary had to be adjusted. The General Manager sent out a tender for somebody to do a feasibility study into the Lauderdale structure plan, and that's what we're talking about tonight. So the Minister and his government have been more than positive on the rezoning. It's just the Council that's holding back.
Mr Mayor, our next deputation comprises Mrs Carr, Mrs Cooper and Mr Moore. If they could come forward, please.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and Alderman. Right. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to address you today. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen in the gallery. My name is Joan Carr, and I have been a resident of Clarence since 1994, living first in 7 Mile Beach and then in Lauderdale, so I've always been in the city of Clarence. I've been a member of CPAC, that's Clarence Positive Ageing Advisory Committee, since 2007, and a member of the Clarence University of the Third Age, in which I've served on the committee for the last 12 years. So I've been very involved with community affairs in Clarence, and I've been really very active in the community. I've actually been in this situation once before. I think it was about maybe 12 years ago, when a friend and I collected 400 names of people in 7 Mile Beach because we were unhappy about the state of the gutters and the drainage in the streets in 7 Mile Beach, because we had a lot of flooding there when there was heavy rain. And so we got 400 names on a petition, and I actually presented it here. I had one of those 3-minute slots, and got a very good result, because since then, every year money has been spent on the roads and the drainage and the gutters in 7 Mile Beach. So I know that Clarence Council actually does listen to its residents and responds accordingly. So tonight I'm here representing the residents of Lauderdale, but more particularly the residents of Rachel's Beach Living, the retirement village in Lauderdale, and quite a few of the members are here tonight, I'm very pleased to say. And we're very concerned about the rezoning plan, because if that land is rezoned to residential and accordingly raised to the level required above sea level by the report, we'll be sitting in a hollow in which we'll get all the runoff from the surrounding land which has been raised, and there's certainly no way of raising our land now because it's all built on. And I know that the report includes a drainage and pumping system, and but we really wonder what will happen to us when the power goes off and there's heavy rain and the pump doesn't work. We'll just all be sitting there watching the water coming in under our doors and wondering who will pay for the damage to our houses and our belongings. And I'd like to quote the report here from pages 179 and 180, which states that there is a likelihood of the site of Roach's Beach Living being subject to inundation. No final solution has been determined for this, although major disruptions to Roach's Beach Living are involved. And we're all old retired people. We've actually all sold our family homes in order to make what we believe will be our final dwelling place at Roach's Beach Living, and really we're all too old to move again or to cope with flood damage. So now I'd like to introduce Kylie Cooper, please.
Thank you, Joan. Mr Mayor, Alderman and others, good evening. My name is Kylie Cooper, and my husband and I own a 5-acre property in the Lauderdale urban expansion area. I would like to acknowledge the work that council staff have done on the Lauderdale expansion project over the last few years. Years ago, when rezoning was first talked about, I wasn't against it. But as time has gone on and it has been investigated, it has shown me how unsuitable the land is. I therefore thank council staff for their recommendation to not rezone, and I support that recommendation. After the J&G report came out, I researched J&G engineers, and they list some of their projects as the $400 million Royal Hobart Hospital redevelopment and the Myer redevelopment. So I would say council certainly obtained top quality, independent engineering advice.
The report by JMG Engineers highlights that the absolute ideal conditions needed to be met for this land to be developed. Number one recommendation on the model being that all landowners would develop. Quote, any departures from the model would see the cost increase and thus decrease feasibility yet further. Page 19. I quote from page 18. A piecemeal approach by each property would significantly add to the overall development cost and require council to assist with infrastructure costs. End quote. JMG wrote this report about whether it was financially viable, not who would partake. But part of being viable was that everyone would develop. I have dawned up, and one of the great things about this is that I've actually met lots of great people in Lauderdale and started to communicate with people that I wouldn't normally go and see. And while I door-knocked, I think there's more than 6 landowners that have indicated already, and I haven't door-knocked everyone because I had school holidays, but they indicated that they did not intend to develop. That makes this piecemeal. JMG referred to the fuel required as a significant amount. They saw it as problematic to the whole development. And to give you an idea of significant fuel, our block, where we live, my home, would go from originally being the highest land in our area to being in a slump. 2 months ago, the first property in this newly zoned strip that was approved by council in the area went on the market. I wanted to highlight to Alderman tonight that this property has not sold. This property is the same land size that JMG proposed was needed for the development to be at all feasible. Page 26 of the report by JMG states that only 30% of urban growth land already allocated has development approvals. What I am asking of Alderman tonight is to not proceed with rezoning of the land at the moment, as it commits council to a further statutory process when evidence shows that at this time land is not at all at a shortage in Clarence. Another reason to wait is that when I spoke to some landowners in the area last week, some believed that if they did not develop their land, their rates would change. Well, last week I finally found time to follow this up with council and the valuer's office and have been advised that rates are paid on capital value and subdivisions are looked at to recalculate other land values nearby. Development was proposed to be in stages so as not to inconvenience locals, but landowners that do not develop are looking at paying exorbitant rates, and therefore everyone that does will want to do it in a hurry suddenly. It cannot be a matter of let's get the rezoning through and work out everything else after that. Everyone needs to know where they stand before rezoning this area, otherwise more division in this community is going to occur. Section 20 of the Local Government Act states that council's function is to provide for the peace, order and good government of the municipal area, and that council is also to be accountable to its community. I've been part of the Clarence community since moving back from Melbourne in 1996. We purchased our 5-acre property 11 years ago, and it is the only home my children know, and they adore it. It is the only property my husband and I own. Our land has never flooded. But there is no guarantee what condition our 5 acres will be in if a rezoning happens. Drainage and roads are a complete question mark because no one knows who is developing and who isn't at this stage. Nothing the JMG report made assumptions on is happening. They recommended against piecemeal. Yes, here we are, we're contemplating piecemeal. JMG highlighted the risk of having individual landowners filling so much land. I have children, so of course I have concerns about contaminated fuel coming into Lauderdale. Who is going to police this fuel? Because JMG recommended one developer bringing in fuel. There are risks with the drainage, and now due to piecemeal, huge costs to the ratepayers of Clarence are on the Now report. And these risks put council in a precarious position for future insurance and legal issues. I'm speaking tonight to express what this rezoning means to others in the Lauderdale area. In my opinion, if you purchase land with the hope to subdivide as an investment, you can just sell and find something else. But for people like me who bought my property to live in and don't intend to subdivide, then we have a problem. I am not going to go home and say, that didn't work out. I am home. I have 3 children who don't want to move. We bought our house 11 years ago thinking we would stay there forever. Through no fault of our own, this now may not occur. What I say to those that want to develop is this is not the time to rezone. It is time for them to go away and do some work now and know the issues highlighted by JMG. It is time to work out who actually wants to develop and their time frames to do so before any notion of rezoning this land can be entertained. When I door knocked last week, it became clear those not against did not equate to those wanting to actually develop. And it became clear that some not against did not fully understand the implications of rezoning if they were not going to develop. In closing, I can only hope that tonight Aldermen will take on board the advice of JMG and council staff, and also now the other side to this, the personal side. I am not just speaking for my home, but for other 5-acre homeowners, and I hope I have done enough in this 5 minutes to convince Aldermen that there is enough doubt over the suitability of this area to not proceed at this stage, and allow those wanting to rezoning to go away and come up with a complete plan that doesn't leave others in the study area worrying about their homes. I thank you for listening, and now I hand over to Thomas.
Chair, how much time do we have?
4.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes. I'll try to be brief. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the council.
Sorry, can you move to the microphone so that people can hear? And it also picks it up on the recording as well. Thank you.
Great. Do you mind if I...
No, you can go for it.
Thank you. That's a lot easier. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and for all the work that's been done on this project and planning our city. I've been a resident in Clarence for 18 years and a Lauderdale homeowner for 17. Obviously, I love the lifestyle here. It's a really beautiful place. I'm very lucky to telecommute overseas and live in this beautiful place. I'm trained as an engineer and have a PhD in oceanography. And in 2012, I was part of the Tasmanian Government's Climate Action Council, which is now defunct. Tonight I want to speak in strong support of the recommendations from the officers to not proceed with the rezoning. I have significant concerns about other issues, about public money being used for private development and also probity, but I want to just focus on these climate issues in the brief time that I have. Nationwide, heading towards 2100, we're facing about a $200 billion risk in Australia. That's a huge, obviously a massive challenge that I don't have to explain to the council because the council has been a leader in this area. To say the least, it's a really complex strategic planning problem. The council really has been given and deserves a lot of credit nationally for leading, again, on the area of adaptation to climate change. There really has been groundbreaking work done. The Tasmanian Coastal Adaptation Pathways Project was funded by federal, state, and local government sources. The work was done by SGS Economics and Planning, and they had, on behalf of these different sources, interacted with people all across Tasmania, and specifically here in Lauderdale in 2012, 2013, and I think 2014 as well. So I went to a number of those meetings. So there was a lot of consultation on these issues. So we had an effort we also had an effort by the Tasmanian government on coastal hazards. So they resulted in really strong guidance that's out there on mitigating natural hazards through land use planning. So since a decade ago, we know a lot more about the challenges that we face. The council is operating in an environment where we're able to make better decisions. We're based on much more clear evidence and understanding of the challenges. So we can no longer say we didn't know. Things obviously have happened in the past and we didn't have the information we needed. Now, thanks to the work that's been done by the council, we have a better understanding of what's going on. Given this new understanding, however, I was a little bit surprised when this popped up on the radar in October, November as a public consultation. I was genuinely grateful that this was made a public consultation, but I was definitely surprised. So I just want to highlight that the TCAP project has directly addressed the insuitability of infilling this area as a short-term action for keeping us heading in the right direction for dealing with climate change. And that, for example, in the area we're discussing, a lot of that area, the TCAP project has found that infilling anything below 0.75 should be prohibited. I can point you to the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Table 3 Coastal Inundation Hazard Planning Matrix, which basically says in this area, existing use and development may be retained, maintained, or redeveloped, but the opportunity for infill to further develop these areas must be minimized as to not increase public risk. Okay, no worries. So obviously I have a lot of issues. Well, I feel that there's enough evidence out there, and I think that, I agree with what was said in the officer's report, that there is no strategic justification for changing these planning tools. And in closing, we're really facing a really serious future challenge, and that the key really is kind of strategic planning. And again, I really support the work that's been done by the officers in that regard.
Thank you. Are you happy to take questions from the Alderman?
Sure.
Are there any Aldermen that would like to ask questions? Alderman James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, last name is Moore, M-O-R-E. First name is Thomas.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Have you read the JMG report?
Yes. Yeah, I've gone through the JMG report. Yeah.
On page 9 of the report, it says, and I quote, which is the executive summary,
Sure.
rezoning land within the study area to general residential is technically achievable, but would require upgrades to infrastructure and significant amounts of building.
Mm-hmm.
Goes on to say the strategic framework review demonstrates that rezoning of the land does not align with the current regional strategy for residential development.
Mm-hmm.
It also goes on to say that it may be possible to undertake development through a piecemeal approach to each of the property owners. Have you any comment to make in relation to a piecemeal approach? By that I mean starting in a southern direction and therefore, as time permits, or if the funds are available, that there could be a move further north. But at this stage, they are sort of identifying a southern piecemeal approach. Any comment to make?
I don't have a comment, because I was speaking more generally about the strategic planning for Lauderdale in general, heading towards 2100. As I have other concerns, which I don't really have time to get into, regarding the use of public funds for private development, which I think were outlined also in the officer's report. So without being able to go into that in detail, I'm really not supportive of any piecemeal development in Lauderdale of this nature.
Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for your deputation. I'd like to resume standing orders to the point of inviting someone to move and second a motion for item 11.7.4, the Lauderdale Urban Expansion Feasibility Study. On the device, I'll call Alderman James.
Mr Mayor, I would like to move that Council receives the Lauderdale Urban Expansion Feasibility Study 2016, that Council resolves to prepare an amendment to the Lauderdale Structure Plan, prepare a planning scheme amendment to rezone the study area to general residential, and seek an amendment to the Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy Urban Growth Boundary.
May I have a seconder? In the absence of a seconder, Alderman Converter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I would like to move the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Alderman Cusick. Would you like to speak to it, Alderman Converter?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, it's important to note that the first stage of the Lauderdale Urban Expansion Project was to undertake a feasibility study, which was completed by JMG, and as we have learned through our interaction and looking at who would actually get that tender, that JMG is a very reputable engineering and planning company. But I'd actually like to look at the definition of feasible. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as capable of being done or carried out. And the Oxford Dictionary actually goes a step further, noting that feasibility entails the state or degree of being easily or conveniently done. And vocabulary.com elaborates by detailing that if something is feasible, then you can do it without too much difficulty. Feasible things are possible if you have enough time, money or energy to do something. There are two criteria that it should actually be used to judge the feasibility of any matter: the cost required and the value attained. And when assessing feasibility, it should be considered from a technical, economic, legal, operational and scheduling perspective, all of which have been covered in this feasibility study. Having carefully read the JMG report, the public consultation submissions, each individual one of them, the officer's report, having listened to tonight's deputations and the question responses, I've come to the conclusion that this project is not feasible and the Council should not progress to the next stages of the project. My primary reasons for my decision are as follows. Climate change, including inundation vulnerability in Clarence, and particularly Lauderdale, has been extensively reported to Clarence City Council over a number of years, as detailed in the officer's report on this item. Council has a legal duty of care not to compound the vulnerability of the area and its residents. I have a law degree and therefore I tend to focus on this aspect of any council matter. Duty of care revolves around doing what a reasonable person would do. In this situation, is it reasonable that council would ignore the information and recommendations put to it by expert consultants and its own expert staff? The answer for me is no. I believe there may be implications as to council's public liability and aldermen's professional indemnity insurances should a rezoning occur, and the area has inundation and or infrastructure problems in the future due to engineering solutions being unsuccessful and or ineffective, where council has actually commenced a rezoning process in contradiction to the officer's advice and recommendation on this matter, and or approved engineering solutions in order to facilitate the subdivision and development of the study area land. At this present point in time in Tasmania, there's no clear legislative protection for council as far as their legal liability for adaptation works. So that's an important aspect in terms of our decision tonight. The officer's report stresses that it appears unlikely that council has the head of power to compulsory acquire land for roadworks or stormwater in this situation. And finally, public money, i.e. primarily rates, should not be expended upfront by council for private benefit, particularly with the limited likelihood of recouping those funds over a reasonable period of time. I've actually documented my decision and my decision reasons, and I actually request that they are included in the minutes. So I'll be giving those to the Mayor and the General Manager and our Corporate Secretary.
I'll take that on notice. Alderman Cusick, second on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why did I second this motion? Although there is a lot written in the officer's report, this effectively comes down to this issue of rezoning from rural living to general residential to 380 500 square metre blocks. And as you can see in the officer's recommendation, there are a number of points as to why the recommendation should not proceed. Apart from these, I believe there is a fundamental issue of equity. The area under discussion includes a significant number of lots owned by persons who do not want their property rezoned. Some representatives of this group you have heard tonight. People who have moved onto these properties as a lifestyle decision and do not want their property rezoned. I think it's totally unfair that some owners' property status would be changed in order to facilitate a potential economic gain for some of their neighbours. If the proponents could apply to have their own land rezoned, by not impacting on neighbours who do not want their land rezoned, then I may think differently about the proposal to rezone land, only to rezone land that owners want rezoned. That is not the case, so I cannot support compulsory rezoning someone else's land who does not want it rezoned. Alderman Jones moved a motion in favour of proceeding to rezoning. That is imposing the will of neighbours on the persons who do not want the state's land changed. What would be some of the consequences? Page 211, 212 talk about general and stormwater rates. However, it's likely the council would need to apply such variation in rates to all properties in the discrete area. Even if this was not applied, there's significant likelihood that property values from the Valuer General's perspective would increase, leading to higher rates. I live on a large allotment by choice and do not want to subdivide. What is the extra value to me? Nil. But my rates will still increase. Is this equitable? Those who favour proceeding stage 2 obviously believe so. And that would include the residents of the retirement village, as the value of the retirement village as well, and residents' financial input may well increase. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, from the outset, it is a long process to go through to actually get this particular rezoning undertaken, to change or expand the urban growth boundary, and there is a huge hurdle to overcome in relation to even the developers, either in a piecemeal approach to developing this or as a large number of them to do so. It is huge. What I'm about here, and in this motion that I tried to move unsuccessfully before, was to have a level playing field, to have a fair go, not only for the potential developers, but also for the residents. There is no way known that I would support $11 million of ratepayers' money being spent on providing infrastructure which is definitely in the province of developers. No way known. No way known. And that is the very basis of why I believe the council should go the next step. The umpire should decide on this at the TPC. At the TPC. That is where it should be decided, where the parties will be able to debate for or against. Now, because the state government contributed $50,000 towards the feasibility study, and council has contributed just under $100,000, the state government, and I actually referred to that letter that the minister referred to earlier in the piece in relation to the process that he would suggest, or he suggested that council go through in relation to this. So the state government has been a stakeholder to a degree in this, together with the council. I'm not talking about what the end result's going to be, because personally I don't think that at this stage there is a cohesive group of developers that are able to bring upon this particular development to achieve the outcome. But having said that, there has been so much reliance put upon the JMG report, and in their summary of their conclusions, they have said the project can be engineered to work sustainably. Flora and fauna values exist on the site but are manageable. Cultural heritage values exist on the site but are not constrained to development. The site is well serviced with both civil, social infrastructure and public open space. There is, and they make this point, there is an oversupply of residential zone land within the urban growth boundary based on current population predictions. But this may change with the 2016 census. For those who have read the JMG report in detail, and I have, there is a review of the urban growth boundary in 2018.
It is now basically out of date, and the urban growth boundary, as you would have, and those who have read from the Southern Tasmanian, I've got to get this right, Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy urban growth boundary, there is a very strong possibility that the urban growth boundary will be expanded, because the last one was done in 2013 and it's out of date. So the whole point of this is to enable the people, either for or against, to have their day at the Commission. That is really what it boils down to. And I have great faith. And I've been in this place 25 years, and I know a lot of people have concerns about, and I quote, the faceless people at 134 Macquarie Street, Hobart. But nevertheless, without that mechanism that can oversee and basically change a council's decision on a matter of rezoning, and also to consider the expansion of the urban growth boundary. All I am saying is let's get to that stage and not look beyond, because that is where it really needs to be decided, and that if the Commission makes the decision that it's impossible, then that's the end of it.
Thanks, Alderman James. Other speakers? Alderman Thurman?
I've just got a couple of questions which might help clarify for me. Is it a normal process that Council finances feasibility studies for private development?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's unusual.
Is it a normal process that Council makes rezoning applications for private development?
Look, I have to remind the audience that it is inappropriate to interrupt. Would you please respect that?
Through you, Mr Mayor, Council certainly has the capacity to initiate rezonings of their own volition. Council certainly has the capacity to initiate rezoning of council and community land. It is not that common that we would initiate rezoning of private land, other than through the auspice, say, of planning scheme preparation or something of that ilk.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I struggle with the fact that public funds, ratepayer funds, are being used to support this development so far. I have been reminded quite nicely tonight that I represent all of the community, and that's what I'm here for. So I have to make an informed decision based on everybody that exists at Lauderdale, everybody that exists in Clarence. I don't want to see any precedent set that may make the future harder for council in determining who it should support moving forward and who it doesn't. That's what I'm struggling with. So if this has merit and the report is there for all of the people involved who want to pursue this, then perhaps they need to take that forward and understand what the limitations are.
Here.
Yeah. Look, I do agree that we need to represent the community, but in representing the community, we still need to make good decisions. Now, I'm not going to make any comment or judgment on what the numbers are on either side of the argument, because the fact is that this is a decision that needs to be made based on technical aspects. It is a question of amenity, it is a question of feasibility. Now, we've been told in the report from the officers that we have an oversupply in the urban growth boundary. So even if we accept that this rezoning is a feasible proposition and the development that would necessarily follow, we also need to look at whether it is the best cost solution for the supply of housing within the urban growth boundary. And based on the reports we've received, it clearly isn't. Now, I don't even think it passes the hurdle of being feasible. And that's what the JMG report plus the council officer's report, I think, clearly shows. Yes, the JMG report says that it's technically feasible, but I think there's some heroic assumptions that need to be satisfied before that technical feasibility can be achieved, and it is barely achieved. And one of those assumptions is based on a one developer model, which is presumably all the landowners acting as a consortium. We know that that model, the most efficient model, isn't achievable. And if that model isn't achievable, there are a number of things that are lost with that model, including the economies of scale in the costs of the development that could be achieved through that model, the urban design that could be achieved through that model, and also the inclusion of the infrastructure in that development proposal, infrastructure which in a staged approach Council would clearly have to fund up front, and it is quite costly infrastructure when there are lower cost solutions to housing supply available within the urban growth boundary. So some of the challenges that are presented with then going with a staged approach, which is what would have to happen if not all landowners are going to participate in that development, is firstly I mentioned the upfront cost for council, but also, as it points out in the report, the difficulty of providing a flood mitigation solution for a staged development, because you will have some properties that are filled with landfill and other properties that are next door to them, and the amenity issues that come from that. Now, Alderman James argues that we should just take it to the TPC and let the TPC decide. As far as I'm concerned, that's fudging it. Of course, there would be a process we'd need to go through with the TPC, and there would be arguments presented, and they would examine those arguments. But the thing is, Council has a responsibility, I think, to make a decision about whether or not to initiate an amendment. And we can't simply say, we have the report from JMG, we had the expert advice from our council planning staff, and they are very competent staff who've presented, I think, an excellent and well-researched report, and we have a decision to make. I think it would be irresponsible of us to proceed knowing that a rezoning doesn't provide a feasible solution and a reasonable cost solution to addressing housing supply and population growth within the Clarence municipality.
Other speakers? Alderman John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are a number of reasons I'm going to support the officer's recommendation tonight, and I just want to briefly outline a few of them. As Alderman Hume has mentioned, it's hard to see how this could be feasible, both from a financial point of view, which is my area of expertise, and a number of other issues. Now, obviously, potentially, if it was done by one developer, there is a greater capacity for it to be financially feasible. But in a piecemeal approach, and with a number of people not wishing to partake in it, it's very hard to see how this could be physically or financially feasible. And one thing you can guarantee, if something gets done halfway, is that council will end up picking some of the costs, which is then an impost on everybody in the municipality. A second reason is the fill requirements. I know there's a number stated in the JMG report, which has been argued by the proponents and other people that it's a very large amount of fill and unnecessary, and the costs are overstated in the report. But for me, it's not just about the costs in there, it's about the impact on the amenity of the people who live nearby. Now, whether you bring in 30,000 trucks, whether you bring in 10,000 trucks, the amount of disturbance, both in terms of noise and dust, and the general amenity for those residents nearby is going to be horrific. And not just for the people close by, but for everybody who lives down the peninsula, who's having to deal with far more truck movements on a road that's not particularly good in the first place. So it's hard to see how that could possibly increase the amenity for anybody. The other area is urban growth boundary. as Alderman James has mentioned, that's going to be reviewed in 2018. If we look at the last draft information that came out, the population numbers that were thought, that were the revised population numbers in 2014, were actually 10% below that of the original report. Now that doesn't suggest to me that the urban growth boundary is going to be increased. It may suggest it's going to be reduced if the population growth has not been as much as was originally expected. Clarence may have the fastest growing municipality in the southern region, but the region as a whole is not growing very quickly. Obviously, we could say, right, we're not going to change the whole overall urban growth boundary, we'll put this bit in, we'll just go and find another bit to take out to counterbalance that. I think it would be a very brave decision to go to somebody else who owns land that is currently in the urban growth boundary and say, sorry, we decided we like Lauderdale better. Oh look, it was mentioned that we are public servants, which we are. We're elected. We have a responsibility to serve the municipality and our ratepayers who are here. But my responsibility, our responsibility, isn't to one particular group of ratepayers. It is to the whole of our ratepayers and to our municipality. And I think we have to make the right decision for the municipality as a whole. And we have to make it. We don't abrogate the responsibility to the TPC because we think it's a little bit difficult to make. And I seek council support for the recommendation.
Yeah. This council, at great expense, employed a private independent body to discuss the feasibility of this project. Now, the area identified is subject to inundation. And now, this is a feasibility study which involved a one developer approach, which was found impossible as not all the owners wish to be involved. In fact, 5 out of 29 owners are willing to subdivide. So where's the feasibility in the whole holistic approach or the one developer approach on this? The item...
Mr. Figg, I'm sorry, Alderman Dowse. Mr. Figg, if you continue to interrupt, I'll have to ask you to leave the meeting. Look, there is no opportunity. You've had your say.
We gave you a list of people and it wasn't followed. It was
I'm going to have to ask, if you're going to continue to argue, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave the meeting.
I don't like to hear lies.
Are you willing to listen and allow the meeting to take its course? Alderman Dowse.
Item 2.5 states that the one developer approach will require the current City Council to undertake work whether or not each property owner is agreeable or not. Owners not wishing to fill their land will find that this mosaic of fill, as a previous speaker here said, Joan Carr previously said, she'll end up in a virtual ditch. In other words, all that area that's filled will be draining into her area from adjacent properties. There are another 30,000 truckloads of fill required for this. Now, is that feasible with the contamination that might occur with the surrounding schools, which has been and areas of local residents? Other contaminated soil has got to be removed before this can go ahead. And also the Lauderdale is known as a floodplain area, and all the stormwater and infrastructure would have to be put in place prior to the development. There are other legal considerations. We councils probably have to compulsorily acquire land, which would be a misuse of council power. Section 176 of the Local Government Act, to acquire land may not be lawfully exercised in order to facilitate private development. Thank you, Mr. Meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I have no objection to developers developing and making a profit. Of course, as we know, this is an approach where not everybody wants to do so. So it is very difficult, and a lot of people talked about a piecemeal approach, and they're quite right. I don't think you'd mind me saying that Mr. Juris came, so we put up quite a good argument.
The fact is, if it was one, everybody agreed, it would probably be fantastic, but the fact is, it's not, because we know people do not want to develop. But I don't want people just thinking in the gallery that, you know, this decision has been made just on tonight. 1 report, 2 reports, 3 reports, 4 reports, 5 reports, 6 reports, and there's things that I haven't bought here. So the decision has been thoroughly looked through, and the fact is, some very good arguments have been discussed tonight. Some very good arguments. I mean, I see here where even our report says roundabouts are needed. State growth are not interested in doing anything like that. It's going to cost the ratepayers heaps of money. So the fact is, I think the officer's report is correct. The officer's report is correct at this stage, and I think we should be supporting it.
Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you take a bird's eye view and you look over the land in the central Lauderdale corridor, it's a big quantity of land and it's close to existing infrastructure. To be honest, I'm not overly concerned about an oversupply of land, and I actually think that the urban growth corridor is somewhat of an artifice and somewhat constructed in the way that sausages are. I don't know that it's necessarily the most pure bit of work or the most diligent, wonderful bit of science. People talk a lot about the evils of sprawl. Well, once upon a time, Howrah, Gilston Bay, Montague Bay, Rosny, to name but a few of our suburbs, were once quite rightly referred to as sprawl. But they actually represented affordable lands and opportunities for families to establish dwellings and over time for communities to develop. I do believe that urban infill has a place in modern planning, but I've got to be honest, I don't think it should be exclusive by any means. If families choose to be hemmed in apartments, that's fine, they can make that choice. But I believe it should be a choice. I don't like it to be seen as the only option, and I think if you look at places, Canberra, parts of Sydney, families aren't able to exercise that choice. So we as a council commissioned JMG in conjunction with the state government to undertake a feasibility study. And prior to receiving the report, I really hoped it would stack up, because there is a big parcel of land there and it's close to existing services. But the JMG report is the most comprehensive report that's been done to date. It is, if you like, the best piece of data and analysis for us to make our decision upon, and it should be what we focus on when we make a decision on this matter. And the fact of the matter is that the report lists a lot of challenges and a lot of confluences of events that would have to occur to overcome those challenges. And in light of that, despite what I might wish could happen, I don't believe it's prudent course of action to undertake a rezoning. In light of what the report says, prudent approach I feel I have to take is to support the officer's recommendations. And I'd say to any alderman around the table that if you're, as we come on the verge of voting on this matter, if you're undecided, if it's literally a 50-50 situation, in those situations you tend to have to fall on the side of the officer's recommendations. That's all I've got to say.
Is that right, a reply? The motion then is, as listed in the officer's recommendation, to not proceed with the Lauderdale plan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Next item on the agenda is 11.7.1, a targeted review of Local Government Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to move a amended motion.
If you just hold it for Could we please...
The information you gave to MG for the report. Just
Yes,
so
Mr.
you know,
Let him have his
foundation study, it's flawed, because it didn't take South Arnhem well into account. It's like it doesn't even exist. So the whole report's flawed.
Just answer this. I live there. Thank you. I will be able to go home and live in my house knowing that I won't have to see support some speculative people who will make money compare rat shit about us people who live through this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dewey.
I appreciate your input. Thank you.
Good Beach Way. Alderman Walker, would you continue, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to move recommendations A through C with an additional recommendation D. I have circulated recommendation D and it reads as follows. That on the basis of transparency and accountability, Council requests the Director of Local Government to establish a meaningful mechanism or tool for ratepayers to compare the efficiency and performance of the Council with other councils on a range of metrics, and that ideally this would be through a website similar to Victoria's knowyourcouncil.vic.gov.au.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Alderman Chong, thank you very much.
Look, I'm pleased to hear that I've got a seconder. Councils across Tasmania were re-elected, or new councils commenced after the October 2014 elections. And it's fair to say, Mr Mayor, that local government has been its own worst enemy as a collective, not necessarily as individual councils, in relation to conduct and focus. Wages are flat, and even when rates rises are low, in the present climate, they can have a very big impact. Ratepayers have a right to know how their council's performing relative to other councils. And all councils should be learning from other councils if there are ways of doing better. And that's what a benchmarking website does. It's a way to see how you're performing against your peers and an opportunity to learn from them so you can get better. And basically, if you're not doing something as efficient as possible, then you should be held accountable for that. It would also be very useful for aldermen around the table in the budgeting process, because when we do this, we tend to do this in a historical context of how we performed 1 year previous to the next, when what we should be doing is also seeing how our peers are going to see if we could be doing things better. So I accept the officer's recommendations A through C, but I think that the additional recommendation D would be a step in the right direction for local government.
Alderman Chong.
Very briefly, Mr Mayor, I think we've extensively workshopped the recommendations in A through C. We've had discussions before about some sort of benchmarking and how we do that. Obviously there are some the Auditor General does, but they're very limited financial information. It would be good to see some other comparisons to give us an idea of how well we're doing relatively.
Look, it just seems as though we are trying to compare apples to pears here, because each council is quite different in its makeup, in its the number of ratepayers, its budgeting for essential services and so on. So what is being proposed here is that we establish a mechanism, and it's not quite clear how we're going to do that, because Alderman Walker has said there is a similar website which purportedly has the sort of efficiency and performance of one council to another, but we don't know the extent to which those, or the criteria that one council applies to another council in Victoria is of the size, scale and dimensions as the key council, which may be the Melbourne City Council, for instance, some of these larger councils which have a lot of, obviously a number of residents, as well as a very high annual budget performance. So we don't really know what the actual mechanism is going to be used. And in particular in Tasmania, you've got a council like Tasman, which has 2,000 residents on its roll, and that grows to 10,000 at Christmas and so forth. But these merely are, I suppose, people who are shack owners or have the capacity to be there at that council. But comparing Tasman Council to Clarence or Sorell to the Southern Midlands and so on and so forth, you just can't. I just can't understand how you would actually do that. And Alderman Walker hasn't given us any particulars in relation to this, other than to go to the website and mainly assess what actually works there or doesn't work there, and therefore come up with this. Look, anything that can improve a council's performance, I'm supportive of, no problems. But unless you have some mechanism, some criteria that you can use as a template or as a framework to be able to assess what the efficiency of one council is to another, then I think we really are sort of in the dark, and we just can't really able to put a handle on this. I can't.
Thank you, Alderman Jones. Other speakers? Alderman Phillips.
Yeah, can I just raise a question? And mindful of part C of the recommendation, I have raised with you probably 3 months ago that the Minister seems to be getting a lot of power in this area, but one thing that does sort of worry me a little bit, councils are not working cohesively. The Minister seems to be taking a hell of a long time to either appoint an administrator or, suspend the council. But what I'd like, and this may not be the right forum to do it in the local government, but I actually think the Minister should be able to put, if he feels the council is in trouble, put not an administrator, that's not the right word, but a sort of acting, I'll use the word acting mayor, to run meetings to see what's actually going on. Now that sounds very airy-fairy, I understand that, but I was actually talking to Lynn Mason this morning, and we got onto a certain councillor on the other side, and when I explained to her, she said, that's not such a bad idea, because I get sick to death of having councils in the press for all the wrong reasons, where I think it could have been nipped in the bud a lot quicker if, for instance, I hate to say this, but the mayor becomes an alderman for a couple of meetings to see how it's running. And even when Mason said, well, that could have some merit, because if you can see the council's working, maybe the problem's further filled with the staff. And all I'm trying to say is maybe something should be in the local government, and this may not be the right place for it, that these things, when there's any chance of any problem, it's nipped in the bud straight away, instead of letting it fester like Glenorchy did. And I think it drags every other council down, having this Glenorchy in the press all every day.
Mr Mayor, I would just like to support Alderman Walker's comments. Just to clarify a few points, the comparative website doesn't compare small councils with big councils. It actually compares like for like, so it actually does provide a good indication. I think what Alderman Walker is trying to introduce, and it's rightly so, that there is some mechanism readily available to the public where they can actually go to and see where their council sits in relation to somebody of a similar size. There is nothing wrong with actually creating an efficient mechanism, and this is really the type of information that you like to know. You just like to know how you can make a judgment about your council, but unless you've got statistics to back it up, you really don't know. So this is about creating some concrete data and evidence to support the performance of your council.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Alderman Thurley is correct to say that the Know Your Council website is designed to compare like-for-like councils. I did circulate on my iPad just one little component in the financial section, which you could see tracking 4 different Melbourne metropolitan councils, how they went on years. be about finance, it's going to be about missed rubbish bins per 1,000 pickups. It's about data, it's about demonstrating value, it's about learning from other councils, and this isn't about trying to be a race to the bottom for who's got the cheapest rates, but every council should be in the contest about demonstrating value, be it lower rating, lower service options, higher rating, higher service, or something in between. Demonstrating what you do and how you do it well. This would help us do our jobs better, and I think in an era where local government is being its own worst enemy, something like this would ensure better pay in the sector as a whole. Seek support.
Question is then the recommendation plus a proposed addition of D. All those in favour? Carried. Against? Carried. 11.7.2 is the Clarence Seniors and Citizens Centre strategic plan. Thank you, Alderman Alberta. Seconded Alderman Campbell, I think.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't spend too long on this because obviously we've had a workshop where members of the committee actually came and presented the strategic plan. Just to say that they have done a huge amount of work and they have interacted with council staff in a very positive manner, and I know from the response that they got in relation to the questions that were asked by the aldermen at the workshop that our aldermen were very interested and impressed by the strategic plan. And it now means that we have a strong plan to actually go forward to request annually for support in relation to upgrading the centre. So I actually seek support. Thank you.
Alderman Jones.
Question through you, Mr Mayor. Given that this is a long-term plan or a strategic plan, is it true to say, Mr Mayor, that there is no definite indication that there would be funding for the upgrade other than at a budget council workshop consideration?
Well, I'll ask Alderman Bomberto and the right to reply, but I'm sure that General Manager's
Through you, Mr Mayor, any expenditure there would require allocation through a council budget.
Any other speakers? Alderman Cusick.
Yeah, I'd just like to commend the committee on the work they've done. And I know that the recommendation is that the report be received and noted.
I'm just going to endorse what everybody else has said. The centre will perform and continue to provide a very important facility, even more so going forward, and the fact that we've got this plan before us enables council to actually put some more priority on works that are required to make sure that that is utilised to its best capacity. And I congratulate the new energy and the strategic plan.
I'll reply, Alderman Bomberto. Motion then is as recommended, including a name change to Alma's Activity Centre, Clarence. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.7.3 is review of the 10-year financial management plan. Alderman Chong, thank you, and Alderman Cusick.
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, I support the recommendation of the adoption of the revised plan, which was considered in depth and recommended by the audit panel. In the year since we adopted the previous plan, there have been a number of changes in the financial environment, which means it would be probably fiscally irresponsible for us not to reconsider and revisit the plan. Obviously, interest rates are at a record low and have continued to be, but the most significant difference between the two, as I'm sure we're all aware, is the Taswater dividends, which went from quite a positive initial projection when we first looked at this plan 4 years ago, to being frozen, to being reduced substantially, to potentially having no guaranteed income after 2025. Over the 10-year forward estimates, this has a cumulative effect of some 15 million, which is a big hole in the budget somewhere. The differences between this and the current 10-year plan are elucidated in the report, so I won't repeat them. The only one I want to highlight which I know is a source of concern for some aldermen, is the rating adjustment factor which has been included. This proposes an increase of 0.5% over CPI on the annual rates to ensure that we can continue to expand and maintain the services and facilities we offer to our community. What this plan does not do, however, is force council to adopt a budget that is identical to that plan. It doesn't make us include that 0.5% increase. Obviously, as the saying goes, there are lots of different ways to skin a cat. And we can consider, when we consider the budget every year, we can look at a combination of ways of reducing capital expenditure, operating expenditure, and or rates increases to achieve the same end results. This motion, by including the annual options paper as part of the budget deliberations, gives Council the capacity to weigh up the various options prior to making its decision. And I seek Council support for the officer's recommendation.
Thanks. I just would like to start by asking a question of Mr. Barter. On page 168, Mr. Barter, 2.8 refers to that this 0.5% effectively quantifies the approximate scale of the response required and gives Council a target to address each financial year, unquote. That 10-year forecast that we have in fact have presented to us tonight, does that include 0.5 for each year as part and parcel of the adjustment which will flow through to rates accordingly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there are two parts to that question. At line 87, there is a 0.5% adjustment. Rating adjustment factor at line 87. Whether that second part of it, whether that flows through to getting an effect on rates is a matter of the Council year by year, which I guess is the reason for part C of the recommendation, which actually obliged the General Manager.
On page 168, 2.5, I quote, the state government has recently proposed to take over ownership of Taswater. Statements by the Treasurer to date include a commitment to maintain the level of distribution currently contemplated. Given that there will be a reduction in rates in time, in the dividends in time, I would suggest, Mr. Barter, it would be very, very difficult to try to have that 0.5.
You could suggest it to the Council through me, but not to Mr. Barter.
Okay, let's go through you to Mr. Barter. Okay, thanks.
Well, no, if you're providing advice, it has to be only Council can offer that
okay,
advice.
I understand. Yes, I've been here a while, so I understand. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Barter. Mr. Barter, it would be very difficult, would it not, given that there has been a reduction in the dividends for Council to actually decide to delete or delete the 0.5 from any rates that would occur in the next year or two.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess I had to repeat the advice I gave in my previous question, which was there's a range of matters. In terms of whether available to Council, in terms of the difficulty of inflation facing Council, unfortunately it's not numbered, but between lines 90 and 91 there are 3 grey lines. The middle of those quantifies the cumulative factor that the Council will need to adjust the budget by each year.
Oh, sorry, Alderman Walker.
looked over this and I'm inclined to vote to support it, albeit with gritted teeth. Local government has a unique ability to just go to its ratepayers to meet the expenditure that's projected, and we don't go as a request, it's basically an order. You can shirk it a couple of times, but we rack up the debt and we can take it by seizing property. So I will be supporting it because I don't want council to be on a debt trajectory where there's no, if you like, safety net. And this is what this plan should be seen as. It's a safety net. It shouldn't be seen as the paragon in the way forward to just build. Through the budgets that the processes that I've been on since joining council in 2012, there's always been elements I haven't liked. But I've always weighed it up, and in the end, it's been an on-balance to support it. Sometimes closer than others, but generally always. But I am wanting to telegraph now that I expect us as a council, as we come closer towards the conclusion of this budgeting process, to not shirk looking for efficiencies, to really consider whether every program we have is a sacred cow, to look at things in the context of, is it a general subsidy for a private benefit, and take some rigour and some courage around that. Because if our answer is just to ratchet up the rates because we can, my vote's not likely to be there come voting time.
Motion then. I note that recommendation notes the reduction in and the impact of the Taswater distributions, but I also note that Part C puts the onus on the General Manager to look for ways to make savings, and I think there's a demonstrated responsibility in that. So let's make sure it works. All those in favour? Yes, I think it was unanimous. Was it, Alderman Jones? I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, it was. I wasn't sure whether you. Okay.
It needs to go
a little bit. It was halfway up.
Actually, I was patting the head. No. Worried about the
Item 12, Alderman's question time. There are no matters on notice. Questions without notice. Alderman Lambert.
First question is, what's the best way to alter both the Clarence City Council meeting procedures policy and the policy and operational framework for the Clarence City Council Planning Authority meetings so that there are clear procedures for Alderman's questioning of people making deputations?
Look, I think we could bring it up at a workshop and discuss it in the first instance.
Yeah, just through Mr Mayor, look, the policy would need to be clarified in respect of that. The mechanism for clarifying the policy in the first instance is I'd bring it back to a council workshop if that's what I'm requested to do.
Second question is how and when can this addition to the policies be undertaken?
Oh, we'll put it on the list if that's okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm going to raise this question through you to Mr Graham, because I keep forgetting. Can we have a pedestrian crossing of some sort be looked at near Service Tasmania where the old Bunnings building was?
Look, but we will. Did you get an answer to the question? Alderman Dowse. No. Alderman Cusick.
Yes, Mayor. Well, I can ask the General Manager. When is it intended that we lift the matter of potential mergers for workshop discussion?
Through Mr Mayor,
want to play with
yes,
us, obviously.
through Mr Mayor, as I indicated to council, I think that workshop probably a fortnight ago. It's incumbent on me to write a report to come back to a council workshop. I have to say I haven't written it as yet, but I will give it, I'm giving it as much priority as I can, but with forthcoming events in the next couple of weeks, it's not going to be for a couple of weeks at least.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Two questions. The first one is, I just wanted to check on the progress of having a workshop to look at the weighting of criteria for assessing tenders.
Through Mr Mayor, yes, I am conscious of the fact I need to bring that one forward. It is on the workshop list. Not sure for what date, but we'll bring it forward as soon as we can.
Yeah, and Mr Mayor, I think it was the last meeting I asked a question about whether council would be looking at a funding application for the Smart Cities and Suburbs program. Let's see.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At some point, could we have a report on where we are in Cambridge in implementing any work that's been agreed there?
Cambridge Master Plan.
Yes, sort of ongoing with the master plan, because there was a whole list of things that we were going to start to work on. Just wondering where they were up to.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Graham, the progress of the Lauderdale the toilets at the Lauderdale Canal.
Actually signed them today. Signed the applications today.
What does that mean? Like the reality of how far away they are from being constructed, because they were approved in the youth budget.
We'll go to,
now nearly.
My understanding is we'll go to tender as soon as the DAs are issued, and I would anticipate that'll be 2 to 3 weeks.
The speed limit in North Terrace, what speed limit is in North Terrace? 50. Okay. There's just been approaches that the speed limit needs to be reduced in that particular area. Has that been an issue at all before? Yeah, someone suggested just some method of slowing traffic down in that area. Thank you.
First one is, actually I think maybe Mr Toohey can answer this. I received a call today from a gentleman to say that there is a requirement under council's policies that septic tanks have to be cleaned out every 3 years, and there's a fee of 100. Actually, it's about $300. Apparently, there isn't a policy in relation to that in other councils. So the question is that the case in relation to Clarence? We have to. It's mandatory for people who have septic tanks to have them cleaned out every 3 years.
For you, Mayor, an operational policy that's every 3 years. The fee is actually determined by the contractor. We don't set a particular fee for that. The reason for the regular maintenance is to ensure longevity and safe operation of the system.
Just on that, is that just for Clarence's? Because it doesn't appear to happen in.
I believe there are some other councils that do have policies, Mr Mayor. In terms of establishing the regime of 3-year clean-outs that would be sludging of the tank, that is what's been recommended by workplace standards.
Second question is in relation to the Alderman's trip to Minzao. Mr Mayor, 7 out of the 12 councillors will be away for 1 week. Wrong, for 4 days. Is it possible that a extraordinary council meeting could be convened out of the country, given that there are 7 out of the 12, and there is enough numbers, in fact, an absolute majority in the sense of the decision process.
No.
Is it possible? Is it possible?
No.
Or will there be a meeting?
It's not possible
to discuss
because we wouldn't be able to advertise it in time and conduct it in the short time we're up there, even if it were possible from another point of view.
Problem with the language too.
Just worried about this memorandum of understanding, which may be binding.
Thank you, Alderman James, for a very good question. For the members of the public, I am sorry, Council does need to go into camera now, into committee, so we need to close the meeting to the members of the public. Moved Alderman Campbell, seconded Alderman Pears. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.